think most of us are aware of the Parker family and the fact that when they returned from Pompeii to the States for their regular return, it basically coincided with the really uptick of this pandemic in America and throughout the world. And at that time, no one knew that they would have to basically not be able to return. They would not be able to return to Pompeii on the schedule that they wanted to. And since then, the government of Pompeii has decided it's going to be a while before anybody can return there because they are so zealous to work for the Lord's cause and in the Lord's kingdom. They have been looking at some other opportunities, and some of you may have heard a little bit about some of this, but I've asked Wayne to take a few minutes tonight and explain what the family is going to be doing during this time, since they're not allowed to go back into Pompeii. No, if you are a native of Pompeii and you're not there right now, you're not going there right now. That's how restrictive they're being about this. So certainly foreigners, people from Alabama, it's going to be a while. But because the family is so very anxious to be working diligently in the kingdom, they have been aware and are taking on an opportunity that they can continue to minister and work with the Lord's kingdom. I'm going to let Wayne explain some of that, and then we'll, of course, want to remember them in prayer.
Thank you, Scotty, for giving me a couple moments. Yeah, we're just trying to, a lot of people have been coming up with questions individually, and I think this was a good idea to bring us up to tell you a little bit what's going on. But before I get into that, there's a couple of things I'd like to do. We've had two people that have been on our prayer list here, and I wanted to kind of catch you up on them a little bit. It's Roy Balmer is one of them that's been mentioned many times, and Nene Johnny, that's the other one. Roy, I don't know if you remember the history of him. He's kind of my right-hand man, my translator, main translator there. He's in his younger 70s. But he's still a child at heart. When we first met him, we were having PIBC classes there, and he was attending a lot of those classes, but we didn't know much about his background. And I invited him to come to church multiple times, but he always said that he was going to go to his church, which meant, as it does on a lot of the places on that island, they have a small Protestant church in their compound, and that's what he was going to. But he came to attend one day, and after talking to him and trying to set up a Bible study with him, talking to him, we found out that he had been baptized in the 80s by a missionary that was there before the Shanahans, the Joneses. And in talking with him and studying with him, he still knew the truth. He just knew he wasn't practicing the truth. So after being restored to the church, we actually had a chance to talk to the Joneses. And in talking to them, they recognized Roy's name and recognized the fact that he had been baptized, but they said he just attended one time and then he kind of went back into the jungle and they never saw him again. So that's a name they never expected to hear again. And that after he was restored to the church, he was with me by my side, has been for the last couple years as the main translator, teaching Bible classes, teaching kids classes, just a really active member of the congregation. And it just goes to show that you never know the seeds that you sow. We might not be around when we see when the fruits of our labor actually come there. But Brother Roy, we heard about a little over a month ago, he had gone into the hospital, and the healthcare system is really bad there. So for many people, we really never know what's going on with them. As we hear most of the time when we ask, they say it's his blood. Doesn't mean anything to us, but it covers a lot of things. But a lot of times when people go into the hospital, that's, especially at his age, that's kind of the end. And that's what we were really afraid of. But after about 2 weeks, he got out of the hospital and he went back to the compound, which is, he's starting to get a lot of his health back and a little of his strength back. So just ask that y'all actively keep him in your prayers, because it would be a big loss for us if he was to pass away. But we know that it'd be a big blessing for him, but to be in heaven. It's the whole Paul, here or to go. And then the other, Nine Johnny, that I'd also like to talk about real quick. If y'all remember in one of my past reports, there was a little girl that was hit by a car and had passed away a few years ago. Well, this is her mother. And she found out, I guess, just a few months ago that she has ovarian cancer. And usually when they detect it on the island, it's in late stages. We don't really know what stage she's in. The healthcare system doesn't really lend to that much. But she is still getting around, and we've talked to her, and we want y'all to keep her in your prayers also. And we'll, of course, keep everybody updated as it goes along. We stay in fairly decent contact with the church. We try to talk to them at least once a week, and some of those conversations are short ones, and some of them are long ones, and some of them are arguments that I try to sort through. But they're doing very well. They're still staying together. Most of the members are coming just about every week still. The membership is still staying strong, and they're really supporting each other. And it shows us that a lot of the things that we did there to try to bond them, we're actually seeing the fruits of that bond now. It's wonderful. I will tell you one little funny, at the time it was kind of horrific, but then after we figured out what was going on, it was kind of funny and still a little horrific. But we have a shut-in who had a stroke many years back, and for the past year and a half, he's kind of been a shut-in that we bring the Lord's Supper to. Well, and he's also one of my main contacts that I talked to there, and he told me, I guess it's been about 3 weeks now, all I got is they brought the Lord's Supper, and Jones brought chocolate milk. And I said, wait a minute. So he said, he brought me milk and bread. And I said, well, that's good to get milk and bread. He said, no, that was the Lord's Supper. And I said, no. They know better than that. We've had a lot of studies about that, many studies about that. There's got to be something else going on. So when I was finally able to talk to the preacher there, Osser, we talked for a little while, but then in the middle of the conversation, I said, Osser, I really need you to help me on this one. I said that Soucher said that someone brought him chocolate milk for the Lord's Supper, and I just really need to get to the bottom of that. Is that something we need to study again, something we need to talk about? And he goes, oh, well, about that. Well, if y'all remember Osser's from Pingalepese, so he has very limited eyesight, and so when he reads, he has to kind of have the Bible right here in his face, and he also cannot see colors. Well, since it's very hard to get grape juice on the island, what I set them up doing before we left, I gave them big bags of raisins, and they've been boiling the raisins to make the grape juice, and that's what they've been using. Well, he ran out about a month and a half ago, and he went to the store and went in and picked up a big bag of raisins and carried it home. He dumped them in his pot like he boils it every day, and then didn't notice anything differently, but then that next morning, the whole congregation just started one by one in the Lord's Supper just having these looks of horror on their face. Well, it turns out he had bought Raisinets. He had no clue that there was a such thing as chocolate-covered raisins, and of course he could not see them. So for the Lord's Supper, he for 1 week, we really need the grace of God to look over there. But strange things happen in the islands, and we have to be prepared for that. I told his family to keep the rest of the Raisinets, and we went back to raisins. Anyway, many things are horrific and funny at the same time when you're working in the mission field. To tell you a little bit more about the lockdown, I won't spend too much more time on it, but we stay constantly involved in that too. They have a COVID task force that they put together, and they are in charge of making a lot of the decisions on what's going to happen on the whole. It's not just Pohnpei, it's the whole FSM, the Federated States of Micronesia, which is all of those islands out there. And they discuss constantly what they're going to do, and they really, just like the rest of the world, just really have no clue in this pandemic how to handle it. So they spend a lot of time arguing, and they're just really in fear of this coming to the islands because they're such a communal group that if anyone gets it on the island, it's going to spread super fast. I mean, I think I've told most of y'all, if we give them a sucker, they lick it and pass it on. It goes through the whole congregation. So it's going to be the same way with any of the germs. Well, that's made them very cautious. And like Scotty said, they have not had anyone back on the island. In about 2 weeks, they're currently in quarantine now. They're going to have their first 41 people come back to the island. That some of these were sent out for medical reasons and things like that. It's going to be the first group to return of locals and a couple dignitaries. And they will be going into quarantine, and they're keeping a very close eye on them. And that's going to kind of dictate what's going to happen in the future. But politics there changes from week to week. But right now, the president has said that he will not open borders again until everyone on every island is vaccinated. And that's caused a great uproar. And it will probably change. It changes constantly. But currently, that's the situation, and it doesn't look like we'll be going back anytime soon. And it's staying that way with most of the islands out in the Pacific. I'm sure that everyone here knows Robert Martin and Stacy and Kathy Ferguson. We've been talking to them also. Out of, I think, 42 places that they visit out there, over 2/3 of them are all locked down still. So it's challenging. But as I said, we can keep in touch with them as much as possible through Facebook Messenger and things like that. Well, to talk now on what Scotty was talking about, what we've been doing since it's going to be a while before we can get back out there, we've been looking at opportunities that we can continue to serve here. And a friend of ours who's a preacher in Arkansas, he came to me a few months ago about a need in Oklahoma. There's a congregation in Hera, Oklahoma that the man that's their preacher there is having a lot of medical problems. He's having kidney problems on dialysis, and he's hoping to get a kidney replacement, and he's on the donors list to get a kidney replacement in the spring. So what they've asked to do is for me to go there and fill in the pulpit when he's not available and to preach on some Sunday nights. It's not a pay. We'll still be working in the missionary area. And also, with us being in Oklahoma, it allows us to do some outreach to some of the places that we haven't been able to drive out to or to go out to. So as we're out there, we're going to try to go out to Texas. We have a person that we met through the U.S. Embassy on Pohnpei that has a large family in Kansas that we're hoping to go out and visit their congregation. We're trying to raise support for the building that I was telling you about, the building that we really want to get built on the west side of the island. So we're hoping to do that as we're working out there in Oklahoma. So we've been given they have a 3-bedroom preacher house, and they're paying the utilities for that. And so that's kind of the exchange for me helping fill the preacher position. But we're really going to miss you guys, and we plan on, as soon as we find out that the island is looking like it's going to open again, we're going to come back here for at least a few weeks before we go out there. So we'll see you again before we get on the plane, Lord willing. That's the plan. We don't really know at this point exactly how long we're going to be out in Oklahoma. We're kind of playing it by ear. But we hope to see you all again soon, and we appreciate all the prayers and support. Thank you so much. Love y'all.
And I think I speak for all of us when we say that we love all the Parkers and we love the good work that they've been doing for the Lord for so very, very long, and the diligence that they have. Wayne said their plan is to, if everything works out well and they get everything together, the plan is to pull out on Tuesday, this Tuesday, stop over at his family in western North Alabama, visit with them for a little while, and then make the trek out there, and hopefully by Friday they'll be in Oklahoma and safe and sound there. We do bid them Godspeed, and we wish them well in this endeavor. And as Wayne said, this is not a stoppage in the work in Pompeii. This is not him ceasing to be a missionary or the family to be doing mission work. It's just a fill-in for the Lord's work and ministry in Oklahoma right now, because they can't go to Pompeii. And so the Lord has opened up another door for them right now to work in temporarily. And the long-range plan, of course, is to return back to the island and continue the good ministry and the good work that they have been doing there so very effectively. And we are blessed to be a part of this work and blessed to know this family. We appreciate them so very, very much. I encourage you to turn to the 139th Psalm. Our thoughts tonight are going to come from Psalm number 139. Perhaps you have heard this before, and I don't know if the thing I'm about to relay to you is actually factual or if it's just sort of a little bit of an urban myth or legend or something like that. But regardless of whether it's actually based on fact or maybe it's a little embellished fact or maybe it's just made up completely, it illustrates a very good truth. But many years ago it was said that as some of the space program was getting off the ground, no pun intended there, really didn't mean to do that, but as the space program was really beginning to develop and things were happening with that, and some of the Russian counterparts were going into space with the cosmonauts, and some of them coming from an atheistic background, supposedly one of those cosmonauts said, well, we went into outer space and we looked for God and we didn't find him anywhere. And then when some of the American astronauts launched into space, one of them supposedly said, well, we looked for God and we found him everywhere. And even if that is urban legend, it still illustrates two very different philosophies, two very approaches to life about whether God is real or God is not. You look for him, and if you don't believe, you're not going to find him anywhere. But if you look for him because you believe to reaffirm your faith, you'll find him everywhere. And the evidence is there if we'll just open our eyes. And what we want to talk about tonight, the question that we want to answer tonight is, where is God? If some people say he's everywhere and some people say he's nowhere, well, where is God? I think the 139th Psalm helps us answer that question, because while we may deal with this on the level of the existence of God and maybe get into some of the various proofs and arguments on one side or the other for God, there are also times when you and I, on the everyday level, ask that question, where is God? Maybe we're faced with a big crisis in our lives, a debilitating disease, the death of a loved one very unexpectedly, COVID-19, and not on the level of does God exist and all the different arguments that are out there in the scientific world, but just on the everyday level that's very practical for us. When we face those situations, where's God? Where is God? And so whether we approach it from the scientific standpoint or the everyday standpoint of this is real life and this is what I have to deal with and this is what's hit me unexpectedly, where is my God? And the 139th Psalm, I think, will give us some answers. We're going to discern from this text four places, four answers, you might say, to the question, where is God? But let's read the text. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down. And you're acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed, some translations say hell, some translations say Sheol. The word in the original Hebrew language here is a word that in English would look like Sheol, which in the Hebrew world, in the Hebrew vocabulary, is the place of the dead. And so the psalmist is simply saying, if I go to the place where the dead are, if I go beyond this life, behold what? You are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me and fall upon me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day, and the darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed me and formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, all that my soul knows very well. And my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest places of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they should be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men, for they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with a perfect or really complete, absolute hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me to life everlasting. This psalm will help us see where God is. And we simply want to take a fourfold approach in answering that question. Number one, God is before you. God is before you. When you look back at our text in verse 5, and really the four ways we're going to answer the question, where is God, are incorporated all throughout the text. There's not just necessarily one particular verse that completely stands out as affirmation of the point or the answer that we're making here. But verse 5, you have hedged me behind and before. In other words, the psalmist is saying it's like you put a fence up, you put a parameter up, and it's in front of me and it's behind me. And let's deal with one of those, and we're really both of them ultimately. But first of all, God is before you. God is in front of you. You may recall when the children of Israel left the bondage of Egypt, God went before them. Exodus chapter 13. In Exodus chapter 13, as the children of Israel left that Egyptian bondage, they were going out into the wilderness. They were going out into uncharted territory for them. They're going out into a place where they did not know where they were going. They didn't have a map. Moses was their guide, but still, they didn't have an itinerary. You know, they hadn't signed up for the specifics of every place and everywhere they were going to go. They just knew they were going to the promised land. Who would lead them? Who would guide them? Well, God would go before them. In Exodus 13, we read in verse 21 and 22, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in the pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. God led them in this supernatural way with this pillar, this cloud that was visible in the daytime and then was visible at night, called a pillar of fire. And it enlightened the way and led them as God went before them to lead them to where He was taking them. We're led by a different kind of pillar of fire today. We're led by a different kind of light today. The Bible tells us in the 119th Psalm, verse 105, your word, God's word, thy word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my path. That's the pillar of fire that we have today. That's the light that is before us today to lead us. That's how God leads us today, using His word in this fashion. You know, we often sing that song, where He leads, I will follow. In order for God to lead, and in order for me to follow, He's got to be in front. He's the leader. I am the follower. But now, let's take another thought from verse 5 that gives us a second leg to the four legs of this question, where is God? Number one is God is before us, but secondly, God is behind us. Now, that's not self-contradictory because we know that God is everywhere. And this psalm ultimately will teach us that. The Bible teaches us that. But we see that God has the capability of being in more than one place at the same time. You know, there are many times when each and every one of us have wished for that power, that capability. Well, God has that power. And not only, number one, is God before us, but number two, God is behind us. God has our back, so to speak. You may recall that when the children of Israel in the book of Exodus were led by that pillar of fire, that pillar of cloud to the promised land, that they got to the Red Sea. And when they got to the Red Sea, it tells us that they're hemmed in by the Red Sea on one side. If you look at the geography of where they likely were, there were mountains on the other side, and Pharaoh's Egyptian army was marching up from the other side where they could have gotten away. They were completely hemmed in and closed in. And you remember reading the text, what does it say that the pillar did? What does it say God did? That it went from in front of them to where? Behind them, to be between the enemy and God's people. And so God, as the text tells us in verse 5, you have hedged me behind and before. God has set the parameters in front of us and behind us. You may recall that God told Abram in the book of Genesis, walk before me and be thou perfect. And so here you have the idea of not only God being in front of us, but God being behind us. Not only God being before us, but sometimes we're told to walk before Him, to walk in front of God. That word, or that expression that's used there specifically about Abram in the book of Genesis, walk before me, you may understand that particularly in the military, what do the troops do in front of the general? They walk before him. That doesn't mean he's not their leader. They're walking before him to show who they are, that he might see them, inspect them, approve of them, help them, point out deficiencies when it's needed, and give them all the encouragement that's needed for them to be what they're supposed to be. So walk before God. Yes, we do that. And He's hedged us in, both in front of us and behind us. And we understand that He can instruct us. He can inspect us. Yes, He walks before us, but we also walk before Him. You may recall in another one of the Psalms, the 23rd one, The last verse. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. So yes, God leads us, but His goodness and His mercy follows us. But now, number 3, God is above us. Number 1, God is before us. Number 2, God is behind us. But number 3, God is above us. You think about God being above us. That has a lot of implications. It speaks of His heavenly dwelling. It speaks of His ability to look down upon us. God is sitting high upon His throne, looking down upon us to care for us, to bless us. Maybe you've seen the Far Side cartoon by Gary Larson, and there's one of the Far Side cartoons where it's called, something Scissor Factory. And there's all these people on this assembly line, and they're making scissors, and they got all these scissors. And back behind the assembly line, there's this big tall chair, like a lifeguard chair at the beach. And there's just this little diminutive old woman sitting in the chair. And apparently there's a new guy on the assembly line, and one of the guys who's been there a while says, "That's Miss Rasberger. She makes sure no one runs with scissors." So she's up there looking down on everybody. Well, God is up here looking down, making sure we don't run with scissors, okay? Making sure that we're not doing something to harm ourselves, making sure that we're safe, making sure that we are protected by Him. You may recall James chapter 1, verse 17. James 1, verse 17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. The good gifts come from where? God is up there so He can do what? Not strike us dead. God is up there so He can send good gifts down. God is up there so He can bless us in the way that He wants to and that He desires to, even when we don't deserve it. God is also above us and seated high, looking down upon us, and He sees our trials, He sees our difficulty, and yes, He hears our cries, and He knows when we hurt, and He knows when we're going through difficult times. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. 1 Peter 3, verse 12 says, "For the eyes of God are over the righteous." For the eyes of God are over the righteous, and His ears are open to their prayers. The eyes of God see when we pray. The ears of God hear when we pray. The eyes of God see the trials. The eyes of God see the difficulties. Why? Because He is above us. Again, when we go back to our text in the 139th Psalm, look how many different times that's reinforced in the Psalm. If I ascend into heaven, you're there. That's where God is. He's there looking down upon us. If I take my wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, in other words, wherever I may go, no matter how high I may be, what? God is above me. God is higher than I am. The rock that is higher than I, that's God. So God, yes, is before us, behind us, above us, and number 4, below us. And again, you see the irony of being behind and before, now the irony of being above and below. That God is in both places at the same time. And as we look at the text, we learn, yes, in Psalm 139, that God is above us. In many, many ways, in many fashions, we can discern and pull out from this song about how God is above us, how God is before us, how God is behind us. But I want you to notice how you can also see from the text and learn from the description of the psalmist that He's also below us. And when I say that God is below us, that's not any kind of indication that God is inferior to us. But I want you to consider it from this standpoint, that if God is below us, He will catch us when we fall. Yes, He will see us when we stumble and when we struggle from above, but His loving hands and arms are there to catch us when we fall. Also, kind of reaffirmed by the fact that God is below us, gives us a solid foundation. Something solid to stand on. This pulpit that I'm standing on was built in 1965. You know, it's pretty solid. It's got a little creak here or there, whatever, but I mean, this is solid. This is solid wood. It's been solid for a long time, decades now. Think about the foundation that your house is built on. Think about the foundation that Jesus says our house should be built on in the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, where He compares the difference between a wise man and a foolish man. He says the foolish man builds his house on what? Sand, a foundation that will not last, will not sustain itself. But the wise man, who Jesus says is the one who hears the sayings of God, hears the sayings of Jesus, and he does them. He builds his house, his foundation is on the rock. The foundation. God is below us. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9 tells us, neither is any other foundation laid than that which is laid, Jesus Christ our Lord. He's the foundation of the church. He's the foundation of the world. He ought to be the foundation of our lives, the foundation of your soul, the foundation of everything that you do. Jesus is the foundation. God is the foundation. The Spirit of God and His Word is the foundation of all that we do. We are founded and grounded on God. And God is there. When we go, as the psalmist says, to the lowest parts that we could go, God is still there. You cannot go high enough. You cannot not go low enough. You cannot go too far frontwards or too far backwards. God's already there. And He's ahead of you, whether it be in front of, behind, above, or below. God's there. God's there to bless. God is there to fulfill. In the 33rd chapter of Deuteronomy, verse 27, Deuteronomy 33:27 says, the eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Underneath, below. The arms to hold us, to catch us, to bless us, to hold us, to love us. Security. You see, a good foundation means security. And that's exactly what God does for us. Perhaps it is appropriate as we think about all four of these answers to the question, where is God? That He is before, He is behind, He is above, He is below. Perhaps an appropriate verse to read is found in the 40th chapter of Isaiah. Isaiah 40, verse 31. But they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Why? Because God's already there. He's before, He's behind, He's above, He's below. God is already there. You might add a fifth answer to the question, where is God? Not only is He before, behind, above, and below, Psalm 139 says, He's beside you. He's right there beside you. Listen to the psalm again. O Lord, You have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before. You laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your Spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day, and the darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts and covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. He's before, He's behind, He's above, He's below, and He's beside. And so the psalmist concludes in the last two verses, search me, O God. And by the way, when you read this, it's not the psalmist expressing an arrogant defiance of God of, oh yeah, I just dare you to find something wrong with me. No, he's talking about an intimate, personal, close relationship with God. And if you find something wrong, if you find something amiss, if you find something as it should not be, Lord, help me, forgive me, restore me, and correct the deficiencies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. As we conclude our analysis of this psalm, we find 4 or 5 answers to the question, where is God? Although I know God has no need to ask any questions whatsoever, because God knows all, just to extend the illustration for what we have been using tonight and asking this, I want to think of the converse of it for a moment. And as we consider the invitation of Christ, and as we prepare to sing an invitation song to encourage anyone to obey the gospel or to be restored to faithfulness, again, I know God doesn't need to ask anything, but has it ever occurred to you, have you ever wondered if God has looked at you or me and said, where are you? Where have you been? Why did you go there? Will you come home? Only you can answer those questions. And if you are ready to answer them in the affirmative, would you come tonight as we stand and we sing?